Hi, I'm Clara Rose, and this is Influence Matters. Welcome, welcome, welcome. The show where each week I share tips, tricks, tools, resources, hacks, whatever you want to call them, to help savvy influence builders just like you to strategically and intentionally build and cultivate their influence, because we know that that's exactly how we generate more leads organically for a business, ministry, cause, brand, whatever it is that we're out there doing, right? We want to build influence so that we can organically generate leads for those things. So once again, here we are at another episode. I'm excited about this one, but before I start, of course, I need to say thank you to Rosedale Publishing for sponsoring the show. They help entrepreneurs and professionals just like you to write and publish their business books. So check them out if you have not yet. And of course, I have to give a shout out to the fine folks at Tampa Bay Multimedia and WeBeam TV, where we are today, for making this show truly possible. Thank you so much. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? Well, of course, it comes from our viewers every week. If you have not done so yet, please drop me a line at hello@clararose.com and share a question or a topic that you'd like for me to cover on the show, and I'd be happy to do that for you. But for today, let's look at this week's question of the week. We have a question from Sam, who says, more and more, I'm seeing the term co-writer used as a service someone offers. What is co-writing, and is it different than ghostwriting? What does that really mean? Sam, that is an excellent question. So I would have to say that prior to using it myself, the co-writing term, I started using it in about 2017 because I wasn't wild about the word or the term ghostwriting. I felt like, gosh, that's kind of deceptive, when someone ghostwrites, which of course was just my own perception at the time. And since then, I've come to terms with that. I'm totally fine with it. But back then, it was like, I need a different term. And so I kind of came up with my own term, co-writing. And of course, since then, I've seen a number of people out there who are also using the same term. And it might or might not mean the same thing that it means in my business. So let me tell you what we're going to talk about for the next 2 episodes. Today, we're going to do part 1, and next week, we're going to do part 2 of a great series, 2-part series called Co-writing versus Ghostwriting. So the real question is, what's the difference, and which one is for you? That's a good question, isn't it? So today we're going to talk about the different options just briefly for a minute, and then we're going to dive into co-writing specifically. What is co-writing? Well, co-writing, sometimes called developmental editing, is a process by which someone writes with you. So what does that mean? Well, it can mean a couple of different things. What it doesn't usually refer to, but I get this question a lot, is those books on the shelf that you see that have someone's name on it and then a famous writer's name on it. So you can probably think of a couple right off the top of the bat that you don't know the one person's name, but the other person, they have a series or a bunch of books, some with just their name and sometimes with other people's names on them. So that's not That's not really co-writing or ghostwriting even. That's somebody borrowing somebody else's influence. And that should be exciting to you because it is possible to borrow somebody else's audience, somebody else's influence to get more influence for yourself. While that's not what we're talking about today, I think that's important to consider if you have access to somebody who has some clout or has some influence that you could borrow. That's not a bad way to go. But what we're talking about specifically is the co-writing process today. Okay, before we get started there, I know that I've switched and we're no longer doing savvy tweets. We are hopping over to LinkedIn and sharing on LinkedIn these days. So hop over to LinkedIn and say hello to me. You can always find me on social media at Clara Rose Chat and share this, not tweet, this post. Co-writing your book with a professional means you don't have to navigate the publishing waters alone. I would love for you to stop over at LinkedIn and say hello to me or wherever you find me on social media. I'd love to hear from you. Okay, let's get started on our co-writing. We don't have a whole bunch of time today and I have a lot to cover. First of all, co-writing, how does it work? So co-writing is the process of us getting that out of your head, that book out of your head, and getting it onto paper and getting it published, right? That's kind of a synopsis there. There are 3 steps. First thing we want to do is the Brainstorm and Blueprint. And if you've watched me much, you know that process a little bit, but we're going to talk about it today and how it works. Collaborative writing, right? Look at that word collaborative. That's super important. There's the to co-writing, collaboration. Actually started out as collaboration writing. And then getting published, of course. And your pro tip for today for that is most people can write their own book if they have the right help. You don't need to do it on your own. You don't need to navigate those waters alone. Find somebody who does it and can help you out. All right. So those are the 3 steps we're going to go through today quickly, and let's start with step number 1, Brainstorm and Blueprint. If you have been following me for a while, you probably have heard me talk about this process. It really just is a proven system for creating a solid outline. A solid outline, sometimes called a book build, is really foundational to a successful book. You don't want to try to write your book without an outline. I've seen people try it, and probably 50% of the clients that call me, reach out to me in some way, that haven't started with some sort of an outline, have been working on their project for years. One lady, 10 years, she'd been writing her book for 10 years, unsuccessfully. That's because she didn't have a guideline to follow. She didn't have a blueprint. Right? So the Brainstorm and Blueprint process is a step-by-step way that we get that information out of your head so you could do something with it, get it into an outline. Now, we don't have time to go over all of the steps, but if I could just summarize it for you, it's about taking those big building blocks that make up your story, and then the supporting or little building blocks that support those big blocks, and then the sticky stuff, the mortar that holds it all together, which is your stories and your anecdotes and quotes and self-quotes, all of those pieces that pull it all together into story form. If you can get all of those things really clear and then get them lined out in such a way that makes sense to the reader, so that's about stepping back and putting on a different hat and saying, okay, if I'm going to read this book, what's going to make sense to me? And then put it in an order that's going to make sense to the reader. If you're telling your life story, it might be chronological, but it might not. It might be based on themes in your life. If it's about your business, it's probably going to be about probably not going to be chronological. It's probably going to be about things that you want them to learn, you want to teach them. So I, of course, have a process that I help people with called Brainstorm and Blueprint, but there are other people out there doing it as well. Just find someone to help you get a firm, solid outline in place, or a book build, some people call it, before you try to start the writing process. I promise you it's going to make a huge difference in the end result. It gives you, just like the name says, a blueprint. It gives you a roadmap to follow so you know where you're going each step along the way. So while I kind of harp on that a little bit to my audience, it's just such an important foundational piece that it always is worth saying just one more time. So don't forget that piece, the Brainstorm and Blueprint. Okay, let's move on to the next step. Oh, hold on. I can't move on until I give you another thing to say on LinkedIn because I'm trying to get you to pop over there and say hello to me. So hop on over to LinkedIn, Clara Rose Chat, and put this out there. A Brainstorm and Blueprint, commonly called a book build, is foundational for a successful book. Of course, I just said that to you, but that's what I want you to go over there and say. I'm going to be looking for it and give you a shout out if you do. All right. Step 2. Let's talk about the collaborative writing or the co-writing process. That really is the developmental edit piece that I was talking about. And developmental editing considers your entire book and your outline to create a cohesive and memorable message for the person who's going to read the book. So in my particular instance, I co-write with someone in a very strategic way. Of course I do, right? Strategic and intentional way. So we first create our Brainstorm and Blueprint together. That way I know what the book is going to be about before you start writing anything. And then when you start writing, we're together going to follow the outline, and you're going to write just chapter 1 first. Right? We're just going to work on that one piece. And you're going to write your chapter and send it over. And I'm going to look at it, and then I'm going to look at your outline and say, are they sticking to the outline? Because it's easy to stray. And if you stuck to the outline, then I'm going to edit for you based on how it fits into the overall book. I'm going to go line by line and developmentally edit it so that it sounds like you, that it has a good cohesive message. And guess what? I'm looking for those main building blocks, those supportive building blocks, and then the mortar, the cohesive stuff, the story, the anecdotes, the quotes and the self-quotes, all those things that are going to hold it all together and make it come alive for the person who's reading the book. Right? So one chapter at a time, we're going to work through that together. Now, I don't know that that's the same process that other people who co-write use, but that's the one that I have found works really well for people. When you don't have to think about the entire book, it's much more palatable and it's less overwhelming. All you have to focus on is one chapter at a time. We get through that. It's some back and forth until you're happy with it. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. Yes, I like the way that sounds. And then we can put it to bed. Okay, that's a final clean copy on that chapter. Let's start on chapter 2. It's a very strategic process to end up by a bite-sized way to end up with a completed manuscript. And then, of course, when we get to the end, there's some pieces that you're going to have to know. We're going to talk about those as well. In Everything Matters, does your front matter and your back matter and the core content and your art program and all the moving parts that you're going to need to know, we'll talk about. Okay, so that's essentially what co-writing is in my business. I'm assuming that it's going to be the same kind of idea in other companies that offer that service as well. All right, let's move on and get back over to LinkedIn and say hello to me. Here's another one for you. Developmental editing keeps you on track while you are writing. It's such an essential part of creating a great book. Everyone needs an editor, my friend. I use an editor, believe it or not, and great writers all use editors. I don't know how much truth there is to it, but of course I've heard that Stephen King has like 75 editors or more per book. Like, okay, somebody that famous needs an editor. Perhaps you as well need an editor. I know I sure need an editor. When I write something and I set it aside to cool, I'm often a little bit embarrassed by, when I go back to look at it, by mistakes that I've made. Things that I thought that I said that I didn't really say. I thought I did. We always read what we think we wrote. So you're going to need an editor one way or another. Co-writing builds your editor into the process. So if you want someone to help you craft your entire message while you're writing it, co-writing is for you. Developmental editing is for you, my friend. Okay, let's move on to the next step. Published. getting published. This is an important piece, whether you're going, like this week, we're talking about the co-writing process. Next week, we're going to be talking about the ghostwriting process and how they differ. But both of them, the end desired result is publishing. So understanding your options is super important. Not every book is great for self-publishing, but many are. So understanding the benefits of both is really important. I'm going to give you a good example of a book that is not a great fit for self-publishing. If you're doing a picture book or a book that's going to be full color with lots of picture, it's going to be thick, it's more advantageous to you from a cost perspective if you can find a publisher to pick it up, a traditional publisher. Only because they then absorb all the cost of the production, you don't. Now, in exchange for that, what are you giving up? Well, you're giving up a little bit of creative control, right? You're giving up that final say on things, the final say on your cover, the final say on the graphics that you use. Even though it's your book and it's your material, a publisher still has the final say on those things. In addition, you're giving up your rights to own your own ISBN. That's that number that they use at the national level to identify your book. So you can flip over any book and look at the back and look at this barcode on the back that has the price built in. That's your ISBN barcode. So Bowker, of course, is the one that manages that nationally. If you buy from anywhere except Bowker, they are reselling it to you. If you traditionally publish, they're providing you with a number. So they're getting them from Bowker. They're providing you with the number. And guess what that really means? That means they own the right to publish that version of your book. Now, that's important for you to understand because that means that next month you can't go and publish it somewhere else yourself because you've signed away the right and have let somebody else have the right to publish that. Now, people would argue, well, you still own it. It's copyrighted to you. You still own it. This is true. But consider this, only because I've had this happen to people who've come to me and said, Clara, I need help. My publisher went out of business. Yikes. Sometimes you have advance notice that they're going out of business. Sometimes you don't, especially in a really small publishing house. You're a little bit higher risk. If it's a small mom and pop, probably a little higher risk than if you had a Thomas Nelson or a larger publishing house publishing for you. Just be aware that in a smaller publishing house, if they go away, often your rights are going to go away as well. Sometimes it's gone forever. Once they're gone, they owned the rights. You can't republish that book elsewhere. Really frustrating if you're using that book and actively selling that book. So, a couple things you can do to protect yourself if you want to go traditional, which some people really want to go traditional for the benefits of not having the production costs. Make sure that's written into your contract, because remember, contracts are negotiable. Have it written into your contract that if they do go out of business, that it automatically terminates their rights and relinquishes that to you. So protect yourself a little bit if you're going to go down that road. A larger publishing house, probably not as important to you. Just some things that you need to know about the publishing world. Now, if you're going to hybrid publish or you're going to self-publish, there's a couple of other things that you need to be aware of. If you're going to self-publish, it's on you to understand all of the publishing pieces. It's on you to figure out where you get your ISBN, how do I get a barcode, how do I, load my manuscript, how do I format my manuscript, some of those things, and it's totally possible. Many people do it. But I'm here to tell you that there are some mistakes that you can make that are not reversible. For instance, allowing whoever's going to on-demand print your book to provide you an ISBN and barcode for free. Now that sounds tempting, doesn't it? They're just going to give me a free one. I don't have to pay for it. But once again, they own the right to publish it, so you're relinquishing that right. Yes, it's a free ISBN and barcode, but you're relinquishing that right to publish it elsewhere at any time in the future, without doing a major revamp and coming out with a new version, of course. That's always a possibility. Okay. I'm a big advocate, of course, of hybrid publishing because that's what we are. We're a hybrid publisher. We truly designed a business that lets you take advantage of both sides of that. It's a bit like being traditionally published and a bit like self-publishing in that you own all of your own rights. You own all of your own royalties, but somebody helps you and guides you through the process of getting published. Now, this is true whether it's co-writing or it's ghostwriting, but most of our clients come through as co-writers. So I wanted to include that in today. We'll talk about it a little bit next week as well when we talk about ghostwriting. Understanding the differences and the options for publishing is super important. Protecting yourself and your rights is super important. So I would say make sure that you are getting the knowledge now. And I guess I'm talking a little more this week about it than normally. I'm just like dropping a little bit of knowledge on you. But here I'm trying to really give you some educational stuff that's going to make a difference and help you make good decisions about what's best for you and your book, depending on what you want your book to do. If you're going to go with a traditional publisher because you have this huge picture book, just know the limitations that come with that. It's okay. Maybe you want to write a companion book that you will hybrid publish or even self-publish that goes with it, that kind of makes those sales better. Or the sale from the traditional publisher makes your other book sell better because you're getting some notoriety. Either way, it's all about education. If you have questions, I am always open to answering them for you. You can drop me an email at hello@clararose.com. You can also get some of your questions answered over on my website at clararose.com. In fact, in a couple of minutes, I'm going to send you over there for something else, and you can look around and see what else you can learn whilst you're there. Okay, so we've talked about publishing. Let's hop back over to LinkedIn one more time and just say hello to each other. Find me at Clara Rose Chat. Self-publishing is available to anyone these days, but it might not be the best thing for your book. Understanding the differences is the key. Making the decision based on what's good for your book and for you needs to happen before you actually do it. You can't call me afterwards and say, Clara, I didn't listen to you. Can you help me fix it? Sometimes yes, oftentimes no. Okay, so let's recap, shall we? So co-writing, how does it work? First of all, we have to do the Brainstorm and Blueprint process. Remember, that's getting it out of your head and onto paper where we can do something with it. Remember that you're the author of this book. You're the person who has the knowledge. We just need to get it out of your head or off of your computer or out of those tablets or those sticky notes. However you've been collecting this information you knew you wanted to write a book about. Let's get it into one place where we can do something with it. Let's create a blueprint or a roadmap, if you will, your outline for actually getting your book done. And then, of course, step 2 is the collaborative writing process or the co-writing. You're actually going to write a chapter, send it to me, I'll edit it, send it back to you, see how you're liking it. And it's a back and forth process until you say, yes, I love it. Perfect, and we can move on to the next chapter. That's the real basis of the co-writing process. And then, of course, getting published, which is the goal. Nobody writes a book so they can stick the manuscript in the drawer. So, at least I haven't found anybody interested in that. Most people can write their own book with the right help. I just have to say that again. It's so important for you to understand that, yes, you can, as long as you have some guidance in it. I get this comment often, so I just wanted to share it with you. People who've been through the Brainstorm and Blueprint process prior to us actually starting their writing will say, oh my gosh, the Brainstorm and Blueprint was what made me know it was possible to actually get this book written. When we were done with that, I knew I could do this. We had a plan, and it was bite-sized, little things that I could do consistently, and I knew I could do it. And that makes me feel good because that was the point of the process. The point of the creation of it was so that we could actually have a duplicatable process so that you could write your book and I could help you. Okay, so we're just about out of time today, but I'm going to be back next week to talk about co-writing, but I want to bring something to your attention. If you are ready to write your book and you haven't started, this is your first step. I have a challenge coming up. It's called Everything Matters, the 3-day challenge. And we're going to talk about front matter of your book and the back matter of your book and all of the publishing matters, all of the pieces and moving parts to actually writing a book. We're going to talk about those in the 3-day challenge. It's going to be held in a private Facebook group. So once you've signed up, you'll get some information about when and where. It's happening the first weekend in December. Of course, I'm going to be recording it so you can go back and review it after the fact. And you'll have lots of opportunity to network and intermingle with other influence builders who are in the process of getting started writing their book as well. So lots of great interactions for you and lots of information that's going to help you get started in the right direction. Just like the little tidbit about your owning your own ISBN, it's going to be full of stuff that you need to know to make good decisions prior to starting the process of writing your book. And you can find it on my website and get signed up for it. clararose.com/author matters. So that's if you get to clararose.com and you forgot the rest of it, just click on the tab at the top that says Write. And it's going to take you to my page that's for authors. We talk about your Brainstorm and Blueprint. We talk about what it is that we do with you, give you co-writing options, ghostwriting options, and then right smack in the middle, you're going to see a big old logo or big old post that says, Everything Matters 3-day challenge. And that's where you're going to sign up to get on the challenge with me. I look forward to seeing all of you there. It's going to give you everything that you need to know from start to finish about putting your book together. Front matter, back matter, publishing matters, all those things matter, my friend. So join me in the challenge. It's going to be here before you know it, and I don't want you to miss out. Now, don't forget, next week we're going to do part 2 of this series, co-writing versus ghostwriting. And in the meantime, get over there and get signed up for the challenge. Thank you so much for spending this time with me every week. I hope that I've given you some knowledge you can find useful. I will see you next week, same time, same place. Take care.